It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there.
Welcome to My Historic Life with your host, myself, Marcy DeCunha, and my 18th century dog, Neptune, a red-bone coonhound. We're here today on the southeast shores of Lake Huron in what is central Huron County to talk about 18th century fishing and naval activities that go along with that. Just off the coast by a few hours, you'll find Michigan, and a little further north, Fort Michilimackinac, where my family and myself engage in living history and interpretive history, supporting the site and talking about things of a maritime nature, from net making to fishing, processing fish, and the essentials that go along with supporting outposts and forts such as that of Fort Michilimackinac. They are a wonderful site, though we can't be here today to discuss them. We're going to be here today to discuss the maritime practices used in places such as Central Huron in the 18th century and early 19th century. It's important to note that we are on the ancestral lands. Yes, Neptune gets excited when we're talking about these things. We're on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe people who have been living here for thousands of years. The settler population, starting with the French Canadians, would have come here in the 1600s and early 1700s, not really making a permanent residence for themselves until roughly the War of 1812, where this region grew in importance. But today, we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss the practices of fishing on these beautiful lakes. And we're going to focus on the equipment and practices used in the Western world, not specific to Canada and the United States, but the West in general, particularly that of the English-speaking world, and as I'm Portuguese, some of the practices that my ancestors would have made use of. One of the first things we're going to look at is the clothing that a sailor would have made use of, or a fisherman. As you're seeing, I have many different layers, and they're all here for an important purpose: to keep me warm, to keep me protected from the elements, and to make sure that I'm kept clean. The first piece of clothing that I have are my shoes. These are buckled shoes. They're straight-laced, meaning there is neither a right or a left. They developed into such as I wore them. So now you can see there is a left and a right to my shoes, but it's from usage over time. I have wool stockings that keep my legs rather warm and protected, and I have underneath my breeches, basically short pants held together with a garter, though they aren't really necessary in these. They're rather well fitted, but I keep them just to be protected, as well as my buckle to hold them together. And I have what we call petticoat trousers. Yes, they're called petticoat trousers, even though they look like breeches. Mistakenly, people refer to them as petticoat breeches. They're not. With that, I have a rather nice shirt, not necessarily that of the lower classes, something a little bit more expensive, as sailors had a habit of using clothing when they could obtain it that was a little finer, often to show off when they were going ashore and to separate themselves from their peers. I would be wearing over that a waistcoat, a variety of vest with leather buttons, rather simple, and then my jacket, a blue, thick, coarse wool jacket, navy wool, using horn buttons with linen lining. These things work together to keep me warm and keep me protected, and when it does get hot, it helps trap in the water so that as it evaporates, it cools me off. An important piece of clothing that everyone would have had in the 18th century would have also been some sort of hat. It wasn't appropriate for men to walk around without a hat, and as such I have a simple round hat decorated with some hemp cord. And I have my queue, my hair done up in a braid, fastened with a ribbon, though in this case, this of course is not my own hair. It's much shorter owing to the practicalities of my life. And yes, I am holding a cudgel In this case, a simple piece of wood with a knot on the end that I can make use of if necessary to protect myself or engage in practices of recruiting other sailors onto a boat. A form of press gang, where we could force people into service in the Royal Navy in this instance, where they would have to serve for a number of years. Whereas in the British Army, you can go before a magistrate to obtain permission to leave the armed forces if you were pushed into service without your own consent. In the context of the Navy, that was not the case. But I'm not here for the Navy today. I'm here to talk about fishing and fishing equipment, fishing practices. Hopefully you enjoy this and you find it of use to yourselves and perhaps other people that you're sharing this with. One of the first things that I want to show you today is very important to my family. My grandfather, on my father's side, who passed away recently, was actually a gentleman who produced nets, and he did so in Norway and in Portugal for many years. In fact, he designed many decades ago a type of net that breaks apart to allow certain fish to get through and others to remain, ensuring that we're able to sustain the fisheries. So for me, this is very important. I can't take credit for the nets that I have in front of me. These are produced by my wife, Trisha Cunha, from her company, Tibrol, Huron County, Bespoke Tailors. The first net right here is identical to the second. This is a linen net made with a shuttle that allows you to weave the net in a style that's been used since that of the Roman era. On the left is the exact same net, except this one has been treated with tar. And when I say tar, I mean Stockholm tar that is finished with boiled linseed oil and mixed together so that it evaporates over time, leaving a net that is water resistant. It won't rot, yet it's very strong. The net does have a bit of stickiness left to it, but you can see the difference between the first net that is unfinished and the second net. In another video, we'll be showing you how this net is actually made with the cooperation and assistance of my wife, Trisha Cunha. To produce these, it takes quite a bit of equipment. You can use wooden implements, or you can use those of bone and ivory, as we have here in this box. There are many different items that you need, such as shuttles, threads of many different types that you have on a bobbin, and different needles and accoutrement that you'll make use of in order to produce the nets. This is time consuming, but it's something that's not overly difficult in practice. It just takes a significant amount of practice in order to get right. So these nets are not cheap if someone were to purchase them. Because of the fact that you have to research the methods. And once you have them, again, it's not overly difficult, but it's extremely time consuming. So it's more the time that you're paying for. And in the modern world, it'll be the materials as well, as hemp and linen lines are not the cheapest anymore or the easiest to get. These are quite expensive and hard to obtain. Moving from that, you also have a different type of net. You have the retrieval net that you could use to catch fish as well. This one on an oak hoop with an oak handle has been made by my wife so that when I am fishing with period equipment and period attire, I can retrieve the fish quite easily. Or if you see something, you can always just scoop it up and have it ready to be eaten. These nets, again, take quite a bit of practice, but they are a style that's been in existence from thousands of years, documented, at least as far as I know, from the Roman era into the medieval era and commonly used throughout the period of the 1700s, which I am wearing today. I am wearing clothing from the 1770s into the 1780s. Moving on from nets, we have to be able to keep our fish in some way, or at least our equipment. To carry our equipment around, we can use a few different things, but a common piece of equipment throughout Europe and North America was that of the pack basket, used by men and women to carry very different items. It would depend upon their trade and what they had to do in that day, from gathering raw resources to finished items, carrying their equipment if they're a refugee fleeing the colonies, all the way into the fishing trade with carrying fish and their equipment of the day. Pack basket is made with willow, And you can see that it has just raw, simple leather to use to secure it to your back. These are extremely heavy, and obviously they don't actually tend to be the most practical for when you're fishing. But when you're fishing, you got to be able to keep that fish nice and cool, and sometimes also have somewhere to put your equipment. For that, we have the creel. The creel, as you see here, also with willow, and in this case, a nice finished leather strap and brass buckle. You can use the creel to actually keep your fish, putting it in the water to keep them nice and cool, or to keep your equipment, as in this case, I have my knife. Though we're not actually going to be fishing today in terms of trying to catch something, though I will have some demonstrations, when I do catch fish, I do tend to put it in my creel. Again, putting this in the water will allow your fish to stay cool, so you can prevent any illness, and it'll allow you to also store your equipment. It's basically the 1600s to into the 1900s version of a fish cooler, and it works today just as well as it did in the past. These were quite common into the 1950s and 60s. You can still get them, though this variety with an opening straight down the center, right in the middle of the creel, is extremely difficult to come by. This is the style that you're going to be looking for from the early 1800s going back into the 17 and 1600s. If the opening is off to either side, it tends to actually be a later creel and not appropriate for interpretation of fishing in the early 1800s, the 1700s, or the 1600s. But these are really neat, and if you can find them, you've lucked out, or like in my case, you have to make your own. When fishing in the 18th century, just as you would today, as well as in the 1600s and the early 1800s into about the middle period, you have very specific tackle that you're going to have to make use of. Much of it resembles that which you use today, sometimes with just a few variations. We're going to start off with the basic fishing hook. As you're going to see, the fishing hook that we're making use of in this case is for much smaller fish, not just panfish, but fish a little bit smaller than, let's say, a walleye, because that's rather big, or pickerel. You would be looking for something of moderate size, not too big, not too small, though there are many different varieties of hooks. The idea, though, is that you could have iron, or you could have, if you have the means to it, steel hooks that'll permit you to catch the fish that you're specifically looking for, just like you would today. But if you're trying to get something a little bit bigger, a little bit more sizable, you're going to have to make use of these types of larger hooks. Just like you would have in the Atlantic fisheries, these would be used in the Great Lakes as well. In this case, these are cod hooks with a tarred line. There is no hole through which you will thread a needle. You have to wrap the thread around the end of the hook and then attach it to your line. This used a tar line, just like we saw for the nets, whereas you can also make use of a line that is untarred, but it is not as durable, though it is cheaper, the line itself. Normally you would use a tarred line just to make sure you're able to preserve that line, make it stronger. But if you're a fly fisherman, well, you're in luck. The 18th century has you sorted out. Though we did not necessarily have fly fishing as we would know it today, the rods that we use are very similar to fly fishing, and there are flies that we make use of specific to the area where you're in. These are reproductions based on museum examples that were given to me as a gift, each one labeled with the exact insect that it's replicating. But they are specifically trying to replicate a very specific insect in the location where you would be fishing. Much like today, these are all made by hand using very expensive silk threads and the appropriate hooks as well. All labeled, as I said, with the appropriate information. So these are rare, they're very hard to make, but you can make them yourself. Sadly, the person who has produced these has stopped doing so. Otherwise, I would be able to recommend them to you. Moving on from hooks, we have lines. We have a few different lines here. First, we have untarred linen line. This is rather cheap, rather effective, but it deteriorates very quickly. The good thing is that you can use many lengths of this very cheaply, very effectively. Next, we have a silk line. Far more expensive, but very durable, very strong, very lightweight. And depending upon the color, it could meet it could match the body of water that you are fishing in, trying to make it a little bit easier for you to blend in to avoid alerting any of the fish species that you're working with. And many of these lines can be used with the shuttle that we would have been using to prepare our nets. Far more expensive and very rare to get today would be horsehair line. We have hair that has been woven together, and we have hair that has been braided together. The woven one would be quite good for, well, fly fishing, and the braided one would be good for many rather strong varieties of fish. This provides very good tensile strength, and it's very lightweight. But these all had to be made by hand, including the item that I'm using to hold them in. These were produced by my wife again, Trisha Cunha from Timbrel Coburn Cunha, Bespoke Tailor. It's not something you can generally just go and buy today. They are very expensive. What are you going to put on those lines? Well, you're going to need some sort of bobber like we have today. The line attaches to the end of the bobber, and the bobber with the cork will float up and down, allowing you to see if you've caught something and where it is. Though if you want to avoid the bobber itself, we have a standard float. These are produced using goose feathers, just the center of the feather itself, like you would have the quill pen, secured at the end with some silk thread and a metal hoop. These work quite well to mark your location. With a lead weight. These have been cast myself using a mold that I've produced, reproducing period examples, many different sizes, many different weights, depending upon how deep you need to go and what you're specifically trying to engage in. Some of them being far more decorative. This one, shaped like a fish. Again, this is a period example from the 1700s, which I made myself. You could produce these using a latex mold and lead, but you would first have to produce your own master copy that you would then use to produce the latex mold. Sadly, this is not something you could generally purchase. It's something you'll have to produce yourself. We have here an 18th century multiplying reel, originally developed by Nesmius Ussensen in the mid-1700s, though this is from another contemporary manufacturer. Yes, this is a multiplying reel and a clicker. There are multiple revolutions per turn, and it would depend upon spinning the handle once and having the reel go more times from there. The gears are finely made and kept within the housing. Very difficult to see unless you dismantle that, and I will not be doing that today. We're using a segmented reed rod with finished metalwork using the Japan method called Japanning, which would require oxidization to be prevented by using various pigments to protect the metalwork. Various lines may be used depending upon what type of fishing you are engaging in. Though it's probably a little hard to hear me at the moment and you can't see too many details, when you want to cast a rod of this variety, it's very much like a modern rod, though closer to that of a fly fishing rod. You need to get some excess line, put it over your shoulder and flick. With the appropriate weight, you will have this go quite a distance, and you have a great deal of control when reeling it in. As you reel it in, you can hear the clicker go. So much like a modern fly fishing line, but used for many different varieties of fishing, as well as merely just dropping it in. Fishing as we know it today, at this point in time, had not been established. It has not been regulated or refined in the same manner. So a rod like this can be used for many different types of fish, or you just dip it in rather than casting. Hopefully you've enjoyed your time with me here today. Though we are on the shores of Lake Huron, close to where I live, being in central Huron County, we will be going around the world to many different locations, both natural and historic, going as far back as possible right into the modern era. And not only nature and historic sites, but places of interest overall in Canada, in the United States, and abroad. Follow me for more lessons such as this and an exploration of many different sites and experiences. Thank you and stay safe.
It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly.